Hi everyone, welcome back. So if you've been following this series, you will know that we've been talking about owning your power and how that relates to emotions, to needs, and to boundaries. So last time we explored emotions and how they are not irrational or inconvenient, but that they really are your first source of intelligence. So today we're going to talk about needs. But before we dive in, we need to start with something many of us never learned. Having needs does not make you needy. So being needless and just putting all your needs aside does not make you a super person. It doesn't help you become the person who is just there for everybody else. In fact, it's the opposite. But needs are not weaknesses. They are the signals that keep you connected to yourself. So knowing what your needs are is absolutely crucial, because needs will tell you what you need to help you regulate, to reset, to restore, to take care of yourself. Because needs are the bridge between your emotions and your boundaries. But here's the challenge. Many of us are excellent at caring for other people's needs, even when those people are fully capable of meeting their own. Why? Because we've been taught to prioritize, to anticipate, to overfunction for others while completely ignoring ourselves, especially women, mothers. But let's be clear, ignoring your need is not a gendered pattern. It's, when our needs go unmet for too long, no matter whether what gender you are, when needs are buried under responsibility, under guilt, or the belief that someone else always comes first, we often find roundabout ways to meet them. So even when we're needless, we have needs. But what we do then is we find the roundabout ways, not by asking, not by expressing outright, I have a need, but we start controlling. And that's a pattern that you can find in both men and women, because men are just as vulnerable to using control to get their needs met, often through what we now recognize as coercive control. Women, on the other hand, are much more likely to slide into micromanaging, into doing it for others, putting the scarf around the neck of somebody when they feel cold because they preempt everything. And when that goes too far, the people around them can end up feeling like powerless hostages. So they are unable to act and speak and choose for themselves. Now, that sounds like a big exaggeration. And of course, it's not everyone, and it's not always conscious, but it is common. We do try to control. Again, no matter what gender, control is the way we want to get our needs met. So because when we call it helping, fixing, supporting, or managing, when we want to fulfill someone else's needs, we often do it based on our idea of what they should need. We often do it to meet one of our own needs, such our own need for safety, reassurance, connection, or certainty, for example. Because control, people say, oh, they've got a need for control. Control is not a need. Control is the mechanism, the method we use when we are disconnected from the need underneath. So we are just using as a way to get that need met. But we don't know what it is, so we control. Now, whether or not the other person actually needs what we're offering, well, that's a totally different story. But that's how so many men and women become martyrs. And that's where, and I'm using this with great compassion, we put on the drama queen tiara and we're going, I'm putting myself out for everybody else here and nobody appreciates me. So people give and give, and they think it's their job, and they build an identity around being the one who holds it all together. But what they do is they carry resentment just beneath the surface. Because what they do and what they offer is rarely acknowledged, rarely returned, and often becomes expected. And that is the foundation of burnout. Because when we ignore our own needs long enough, when we pour ourselves into everything we do to meet everybody else's needs, when we cannot rest until every box is ticked and every person around us is okay. We don't just lose energy, we lose ourselves. Now, I know this pattern intimately. I grew up in a chaotic household, let's call it that. There was never any predictability around emotional responses. So some days people would be responding with calmness, and on other days there would be rage. Sometimes, if I needed help, I was completely left alone, and at other times, the decision that I just needed help with was taken out of my hand and managed for me, and not necessarily in the way that I needed it to be, or that my need wanted me to handle it. There was no middle ground. There was no safety. There was no consistency. So what did I learn? I learned to scan. I learned to anticipate. I learned to plan for every possible reaction. I became hypervigilant. And because my survival, that's how I had coded that, because that's what children do, depended on staying safe, I did what I could to meet the needs of the people around me before they even voiced them. But the problem was somewhere around that, I disappeared. I just didn't know who I was anymore because my needs didn't come last. They often didn't even register. And so I took that into my adult life and I worked like that. I was the overachiever. I mean, I did lots of things where people go, "You did what?" It was only after I'd been diagnosed with chronic fatigue that I began to learn what it meant to care for myself, what it meant to stop caretaking others, to care for them, to stop feeling responsible for every mood and crisis, for every reaction or outcome, because, that was me. Something went wrong, it was my fault. That's what I had learned. But changing that didn't happen overnight. I got help. I went into therapy, I worked with coaches, I did workshops, and eventually I unraveled the terror I used to feel when I thought I had gotten it wrong. Because it used to be physical responses. I would often start sweating, my mind would start racing when I felt that I hadn't fulfilled someone else's needs, and now risk punishment or worse, disappointment, disapproval, rejection, all of those things that meant I didn't belong. But the good news is I recovered from chronic fatigue, and most importantly, I learned how to take care of my needs and let other people handle theirs. Because we can all learn. We can all learn to listen to our needs again. We can learn to recognize them without guilt. We can learn to express them without shame. And that's part of what it means to reclaim and own your power. Because when you listen to the messages your emotions are sending you, so may want to watch last week's live again, and if it's no longer there, it's on my YouTube channel. So when you listen to the messages your emotions are sending you, you begin to understand what you truly need. And when you understand what you need, you're going to be able to set boundaries that protect what matters to you. And that's what we'll explore next time. But for now, I'm inviting you to just ask yourself, what do you really need right now? When was the last time you fulfilled a need without justifying it? When you took a break, when you said no, and you did something selfish? When was the last time you asked for something instead of waiting and hoping that somebody would notice? They would guess what you needed. Well, you matter. And your needs matter. And learning to honor them is not selfish. This is how you return to yourself. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention. I will see you next time.